Hey, what is up everyone, it's David here. Square is officially buying out Afterpay. Initially, I thought it was a joke when people started sending me articles that Square is buying out Afterpay completely, but it turns out this to be true. So I want to make a quick video to share some of my thoughts on the impact for both companies and what that means for shareholders of Square and Afterpay. Before we get started, a lot of you have asked for my thoughts on what's happening in China and whether China is still investable. So I made a dedicated video on just that, and I've shared some of my intimate experiences being educated in China as well. So feel free to check out that video after this one. As usual, if you do learn something new, it will mean the world to me if you could gently smash a like button somewhere around here, and no, this video is not financial advice or recommendation to do anything. So the first thing I want to talk about is the transaction detail. Now, Square is essentially buying out Afterpay for approximately 29 billion US dollars. This is going to be all paid in Square stock. But Square do have the option to potentially pay 1% of the total transaction in cash. Now, with Afterpay, as of recording this video, today when the market opened, it popped. Now, when the share price popped, it's essentially reflecting the transaction. It's reflecting the announcement that Afterpay will essentially be bought out. Some Afterpay shareholders is not exactly happy about this because Square is essentially paying approximately a 30% premium, whereas the all-time high in this month right here was getting close to 160 bucks. So they got a little bit of a discount, and not to mention that a lot of shareholders are a little bit salty from the perspective that there's still a lot of growth left in Afterpay, and they think that they sold too early. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Because the entire transaction is paid in Square stock, I do believe that overnight we should see the share price of Square come back down to reflect the transaction and the share dilution of the amount of shares that they're gonna give Afterpay shareholders. And then I want to talk about the key slides in the Afterpay transaction slide deck. I'll leave a link in the description box below for anyone who's interested. But the first slide I want to talk about is the opportunity of buy now, pay later. It's essentially saying that the opportunity within payments is massive and the buy now, pay later penetration is really small. But the one thing I do want to highlight here is that the value proposition for buy now, pay later really is the opportunity to enable merchants to increase conversion, basket size, and more customers without offering discount. That might sound simple, but it comes with a lot of challenges, both financial challenges and also technical challenges. Just a quick refresher on how buy now, pay later actually works. Buy now, pay later is a three-sided marketplace business. On the one side, you have debt warehouses, which is where financial institutions pour money in, and this is debt. And buy now, pay later companies will have to borrow that money out of that warehouse to pay the merchants. But in the process of paying the merchants, they will basically take their cut, and then the merchants will ship the product to consumers, where consumers will do monthly payments back to the buy now, pay later, which the buy now, pay later will pay the money back to the debt warehouse. So that's really how the buy now, pay later companies work. The interesting thing being bought out by Square is that Square has a banking arm. So there's an opportunity where Square's banking arm could potentially structure finance deals that will be a lot more favorable compared to other financial institutions for Afterpay, now that Afterpay is in the Square ecosystem. On top of that, this is great for Square because Afterpay is going to be integrated within Square, which means that there's going to be a lot more opportunities for the user to log back onto the Cash App, and that could give the Cash App team a lot more of an opportunity to monetize the users. And then with Square, because they have so many merchants, Afterpay essentially have a brand new channel to acquire brand new customers as merchants. So let's talk about these two things in detail. With the Cash App integration, I think we're just gonna have to wait to see how things pan out. But from the initial impressions, the idea is to tightly integrate Afterpay into Cash App for both discovery of new brands and also drive repeat engagement within the app so that there's more of a chance for the Cash App team to monetize the users. Because the more you log on, the more of a chance that they can do push notifications, potentially presenting you with some kind of a deal to do some kind of transaction. So there's a lot of different things that you can do as long as people are reopening the app. And then when we dig a little deeper into the merchant ecosystem, I think it's really interesting to know that there are millions of merchants on Square. And even though that Afterpay only have approximately 100,000 merchants, these are different sizes. Afterpay's merchants tends to be enterprise scale, so much bigger enterprises that do a lot of gross merchandise volume, right? Whereas Square might be potentially the mid-market segment where they are essentially mom and pop coffee shops, it could be restaurants, it could be other places. So from that perspective, it really seems like Square is getting a better deal because they will essentially get access to all of the enterprise customers. But within the broader segment, the mid-market segment, I think Afterpay can essentially tap into this million of merchants and convert them into customers. And the geography of sales is also really important because majority of the gross merchandise volume is from outside of US for Afterpay. Essentially, Square is getting access to all of this volume that's outside of the core market in the US. Whereas for Square, most of the gross payment volume is actually in the US. So this is basically giving Afterpay a bigger entrance into the US market. And thinking a little bit more on the synergies between Afterpay and Cash App, by having Afterpay in your ecosystem, it's making the go-to-market strategy for Cash App in Australia much simpler, if that's what they want to do. And most people don't talk enough about this, but there are 18 transactions per month on average for monthly actives on Cash App, which means that they know a lot about their users. So Afterpay can actually leverage the data set that's happening in Cash App to determine whether to lend more to a particular user or lend less. And then when it comes to this slide, Afterpay and Square is essentially highlighting the synergies. I have highlighted a few that I think is by far the key. And on the consumer side, it's all about strengthening Afterpay's consumer base of 16 million with 70 million annual active Cash App customers. So the last slide is all about synergies between the two companies on the consumer side and then on the merchant side. On the consumer side, it's two-way street, right? Afterpay gets access to 70 million annual active Cash App customers, especially over in the US. So that's a lot of people. But to be perfectly honest, I'm more interested on the merchant side because really, if we go back to how Buy Now Pay Later works, Buy Now Pay Later works the best when you acquire merchants that the consumers want to buy from. So I am a lot less interested when it comes to the consumer side of things. And in my honest opinion, I think that it benefits Cash App more than it benefits Afterpay, at least on this side, just because having Afterpay drives a lot of repeat engagement. And then the repeat engagement can be further monetized by the Cash App team by potentially presenting the Cash App users with deals, savings, with tons of different things. So a lot of different ways to monetize the user base. But for Afterpay, what's really, really beneficial really is the merchants, because there are millions of merchants on Square. Yes, they can be mom and pop coffee shops, but it can be also boutique retail stores. And instead of Afterpay spending a crap ton of money trying to acquire merchants, they have a brand new channel that they can go into and sell into to bring merchants onto their platform, which ultimately will drive more consumers, right? So this, I think, is a massive plus for Afterpay. But it's also a massive plus for Square because Square get access to enterprise customers. These enterprise customers that does a lot of volume online, suddenly they have access to them. So Square will now have a chance to sell their products into enterprise customers. So this is a pretty big deal for both Afterpay and Square. I've also highlighted this segment right here where they're essentially saying that they want to help Afterpay grow their presence with SMBs, in-person commerce, and new verticals. Now, I'm actually wondering whether Square is referring to small business loans to these people or more just growing the Buy Now Pay Later exact same product with the small businesses. We will have to wait and see. Before I share my final thoughts, I think it's still really worthwhile mentioning that Afterpay shareholders can still reject the proposed Square offer. Whether they will or they won't, we'll just have to wait to see how things pan out. Here are some of my final thoughts on Afterpay being bought out by Square. For Afterpay shareholders, some of them might feel a little bit cheated because some believe that there's still a lot of room for Afterpay to grow and they sold too early. But overall, for Square shareholders, they should be really happy about this, and Square is really flexing their corporate development teams. And for companies like Stripe and Square to really compete against MasterCard, Visa, and PayPal, it does seem like acquisitions to accelerate their product offerings is becoming really important. Right after Square announcing that they're gonna buy out Afterpay, my immediate thoughts were, if getting bought out is the end game, then what's the end game for Zip? Let me know in the comment section below whether you think that Zip will eventually be bought out and by who. One thing I know for sure is that PayPal should be hella nervous. Because if this transaction is approved, Square with Afterpay is a formidable foe. Not to mention, I will be pretty nervous if I was a small buy now pay later company in the current landscape, because the ground seems like it's literally shifting beneath their feet. Thank you so much for hanging out with me all the way to the end. If you did learn something new, consider gently smacking the like button right there. Subscribe to my channel, click onto the bell so that when I release future videos, I can let you know. If you're still bored, I left a video on the screen that I think it's incredible to watch next. And as usual, Otto will always do the honors, and I'm gonna see you very, very soon.